We are back. Another episode of the Golden V podcast, streaming live to our YouTube channel with Earl Thomas from the Voice Power podcast. I think Earl is probably one of our first guests that we ever had on the podcast in season 2, I want to say, because we were getting more and more into doing Vancouver Warriors lacrosse updates. So, with tonight's game in Vancouver, Friday, January the 24th, 2025, not 24. We are back for another episode of the Golden V podcast looking at Vancouver Warriors with a 3-3 record up against a rematch from last Friday's game in Ottawa against the Ottawa Black Bears. It's not a home and home because the Warriors played Monday actually in Philadelphia and lost to the Wings 14-13. Earl, time to bring you in. How are you?
I'm doing good. I always love talking lacrosse with you, man.
It's great to have you back. You were one of our first guests talking lacrosse, and we've had so many guests since, including our friend of the show, Brett Mitski, who is obviously the Vancouver Warriors captain. I managed to text with Brett just a little bit last weekend after they made their way into Philadelphia before their game against Philadelphia on Monday, which got moved from Sunday because of the NFL's divisional game between the Los Angeles Rams and the Philadelphia Eagles, which the Philadelphia Eagles won and are now in the NFC Championship this weekend. So that explains the schedule. But I know, Earl, you and I talked a little bit about off the air how we started with a 3-3 record, but we had quite a few buys. And then the month of January, we're playing 5 games in the month of January.
It's a great improvement because remember last year we were 1-8.
That's right. That's right. So there's been some improvement in the record. And I was just looking through an interview from yesterday where head coach Kurt Malowski was on Donnie and Dolly, the local show on Czech TV with Don Taylor and Rick Dollywall, and obviously Ryan Henderson producing. And I was a nice, pleasant surprise to see Kurt on Donnie and Dolly doing an interview for tonight's game. And in listening to that interview, I didn't realize Kurt and Don's connection to each other and their families and their connections to lacrosse with each other. So actually quite an in-depth interview there, or you didn't even really need to hear the whole interview to realize that history. But let's start looking at this game that's coming up tonight because you have sent me a bunch of notes. So why don't you get started with what's happening for this game?
Well, they had a really close game in Ottawa, and I think they're ready to win because when you lose 2 games in a row by 1 goal, they lost to Philadelphia by 1 goal, you're ready to win. And I mean, the difference in this team is really, it's really amazing. Not just in the record, but I think it's the attitude. I think Kurt, I've noticed in his interviews, he is a very positive person. He looks for the positive. He looks for the solutions. And it was hard starting a year ago, but he came with, at the end of the season, 6 wins out of 8 and 5 in a row.
Yeah. And I mean, carried that over with the 3-3 record, a little bit deceptive, that record. And it's a shame when they didn't win those 2 games by 1 goal because 3-3 doesn't sound as good as 3-1 does. And I mean, they lost that opening game way back on November 29th to the Colorado Mammoth in Colorado, where they were leading. And then obviously Colorado came back in the second half and took over just like they did last year. And we'll get a little more into the power rankings too. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Mammoth, but you had some stuff down for me that I was just looking at. You're talking about the top 5 Warriors scorers this year. And also you had some information on the NLL power rankings.
Yes, I've got both of those.
Okay. Go ahead with those.
The top 5 scorers, of course, obviously Keegan Ball. I mean, he's just really doing great things this year. He has become the second he's got the second most assists in history for the Vancouver franchise, surpassing Logan Schuss with 278 and Gary Rosicki 280. Reese Dutch is the top 523 assists. And Keegan Ball, 15 goals, 15 assists, 30 points, and only 4 penalty minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Power play goals, 4. Power
Right.
play assists, 3. And again, the game against San Diego, he became the 4th player in NL history to score a sock trick in 1 quarter, and that is 6 goals. Adam Charlabides has got 8 goals and 14 assists, no penalties, 1
Right.
power play goal, and 5 power play assists. So he's a real key for the
Right.
Warriors. Kevin Crowley, 8 goals and 13 assists, only 4 penalty minutes, 3 power play goals, and 2 power play assists. Owen Grant, only in his 2nd year, he's got 9 goals and 5 assists. He is a real going concern. What a great
Yeah,
player.
and sorry, just to add something, Earl, he only had 8 goals all of last year. I was listening to that episode of
Wow.
Donnie and Dolly, right? So he's already surpassed his total in less than half a season for the Warriors. So keep going, because there's some other interesting notes that I found too.
Yeah, and he's got the most penalty minutes of the top 5. He's got 12.
Okay.
Jonathan Peshko, 4 goals and 8 assists. He's in his rookie year. That's 12
right.
points. No penalty minutes, 1 power play goal, and
Mm-hmm.
2 power play assists. So those are your top 5. And what was the other thing you wanted me to bring up? It was the power rankings.
Yeah, just about the power rankings, because you had broken down 1 through 5. So I'm just going to share those power rankings here in the chat, and I've actually just done that, so people can take a look at who's the top 8. And I can think of the past couple of years when we did the podcast, we never saw the Warriors anywhere near the top, right? They're always ranked near the bottom. So it's nice to see them sitting at number 5 at 3-3. They were ranked 2nd, but dropped to 5th because of those 2 losses to Ottawa and Philadelphia, both by 1 goal. Why don't you go through those power rankings a little bit?
Oh, okay, I got them here now. Buffalo Bandits, of course, they're wanting to three-peat. They're at 5-0. They beat Philadelphia 19-14. It looks like Philadelphia plays in a lot of high-scoring games. It was 14-13. Played Vancouver.
Right.
They have a bye this week, Buffalo.
Right.
Philadelphia wins are 5-2, and they lost to Buffalo 19-14. They're in their bye week for week 9. Previous ranking was number 3. Ottawa Black Bears, formerly the New York Riptide, they're 3rd, and they're at 4-2. Previous ranking, they were at 8th, so they've really jumped up with that win against Vancouver.
Yeah, they have.
Yeah. Since their disappointing 18-7 loss to the Bandits on December 13, the Black Bears have gone 3-1 with only 1 blemish, being a 1-goal loss to San Diego. Number 4, Saskatchewan Rush. They're at 4-2, and they lost to Toronto 11-8. And the week 9, their opponent is Albany, who are at 2-5. And their previous ranking, Saskatchewan was at 4th. That's interesting thing about Albany is they were at the bottom 2 years ago. They came up to the top last year. Now they're in the bottom 2-5. So, but that's only the beginning.
Right.
So the Rush have slipped up twice in the last 3 games, most recently against the Rock on Saturday. They had a 3-0 start. So they were really off to the races. But those are your top 5. And, of course, Vancouver is number 5, which is, it's good. It's good, I think, compared to what they were in the bottom last year.
Yeah, and what's interesting, I'm just looking at the rankings, too, is the Seals just missed. They're at 3-4. They were 7th. They dropped because they lost to the Las Vegas Desert Dogs 12-10. They're on a bye week this week, but the Seals stand out for me, too, because of their effectively they crumbled against the Warriors, right? Like they were up in that game 6-3, as I recall, and ended up being an 11-9 Warriors win, thanks in part to the Keegan Ball sock trick. But I just felt like in that game, as you watch Chris Irregolieri, who I talked about on a previous podcast because he was playing for the Victoria Shamrocks in the 2024 season in the Western Lacrosse Association. Shamrocks going all the way to the Mann Cup, losing to Six Nations Chiefs. Obviously, the Major Lacrosse League was hosting this year's Mann Cup. And it was just a surprise because I felt Origlieri, where I sit in the party zone, I get both goalies for 2 quarters each, and like really, really close. And it looked like Origlieri in that game got tired as the game went on. You know, and he wasn't quite as strong, whereas Walsh seemed to get better. And there's one interesting thing in this thing about the rankings too, is that it's the first time the Seals have slipped under 500 since December 2021.
Wow.
So that's a while, right? I mean, we always talk about how great the
Yeah.
San Diego Seals are, and I was a bit surprised the Warriors came back, just because I think one of the last times I'd seen the Seals play Vancouver was probably way back in 2022 when you and I saw them. That was a 10-9 game for for San Diego, and that was still when we had the goalies Alex Bouquet in net. So I've seen a few Seals games in the past, and we always got our butts kicked, or we always lost. So it's nice to see that come from behind win, and it was an interesting thing to see the Seals kind of crumble like that. I didn't really expect that. Obviously, that's maybe not one of the reasons why they missed it in the power rankings. But if they'd lost it to Las Vegas and would have lost us the week before that, you know, I can see why San Diego slipped down the rankings a bit. Moving up to the rest of the rankings at number 6. Obviously, this is the Calgary Roughnecks sitting at 3-2, and I remember the impressive Warriors win by the Warriors against Calgary in Calgary on December the 28th. That game on TSN, and how the fact the Warriors, despite a third quarter pushback from Calgary, held on in that game to win 14-10. You know, and one of the things here in the power rankings talks about Curtis Dixon and Dane Doby, and just how the Roughnecks are going to go as far as those two guys can take them. That Warriors game in Calgary, I thought the Warriors did a good job of shutting both those guys down. And they've
A
got
lot to
Jesse
shut down. Boy, that is a lot.
right. And just looking here, you know, the week's game last week where they beat the Georgia Swarm, and we'll get to the Swarm in a minute. You know, Jesse King scores twice against the Swarm. And they're just talking a little bit here about how they had lacked some secondary scoring. Definitely the case in the game against Vancouver. And obviously Cam McLeod being in net, right? There is no Christian Del Bianco. I talked to Brad Challoner about Christian Del Bianco way back in December on the podcast, and how he thought it was funny that Christian is just sort of posting a lot of stuff on Twitter, or X as they call it now, about lacrosse, but not indicating why. And here they say Cam McLeod hasn't posted the kind of numbers Calgary fans hoped, with 29 saves against Georgia. But I thought Cam McLeod was great that game against Vancouver. And I thought, you know, the fact that they don't have Christian Del Bianco, and I think that McLeod has played pretty admirably for Calgary, especially the game that I saw. I mean, obviously he's not Del Bianco, but I thought his efforts were pretty good. And I don't know where Calgary's record would be with Del Bianco, but he's not there. So, you know, it's interesting to see that develop, and interesting to see where Calgary sits. Also interesting to see with some of these teams and their records. Some teams have played more games than the other team. We're going to look at 8th ranked Georgia, who lost to Calgary last week, and 7th ranked Colorado. And Colorado went into Albany on a back-to-back and lost 13-10. But I still remember that Warriors game to start the season, where obviously the Warriors were up on Colorado in the first half, and then Colorado came back and beat us just like they did last season. But the Mammoths have played 7 games, right? I mean, whereas Calgary's played 5, and obviously there's some bye weeks to factor in there. Georgia's now played 7, and they're on a bye week this week. And so it's kind of interesting. Maybe these records will even out a bit. The Warriors are 3-3 after playing 6 games. So Warriors, as we said, started the season with more buys, but looking at breakdown within Colorado, obviously losing 13-10 to Albany. They play Rochester, who's 3-5 this week. That was Vancouver's first win. The Warriors win back in December, on December 13th in Vancouver at Rogers Arena. The Warriors beat the Rochester Nighthawks. And so I'm just trying to think if there's anything else we can pull out on the Mammoth.
I have one other thing for you.
Go ahead.
When Vegas beat the Seals, that was a home game for Vegas. It was their first sellout.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's
So
good. I mean,
that franchise is doing well. I think that is it second, third, or fourth year. They're really brand new.
yeah, and obviously Panther City didn't make it with the dispersal draft this offseason, right? So
Yes, it was 2023. I saw them and we beat Vegas in
right.
here in Vancouver.
Let's look at some
So
more
that was
stuff in
our
the
first year, 2023.
right. Okay. Yeah. So Vegas hasn't been in the league that long either.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what else we can find on Colorado, and obviously Georgia's our last team who started 4-0. Then now they've lost 3 in a row. Just looking, Swarm were 3-0 in 1-goal games during their undefeated start, but then obviously losing the next 3 games. And I'm just trying to figure out when the Warriors actually play Georgia. It may not be until later in the year, and I don't even know if we actually play them at home. I'm trying to remember, but one of the other things I wanted to mention quickly on the podcast too, obviously, is goaltending with Aiden Walsh, and you probably have the Black Bears goalie's name there as well.
Zach Higgins.
Yeah, so Higgins and Walsh start tonight. I think that's pretty much a guarantee. And as
Yeah.
I said to you off the air before, I felt that Walsh, the last game I saw at home against San Diego, and even in the game last week against Ottawa, I mean, he's played really well. He was one of the league leaders at one point, right? And it was him and Chris Origlieri, and it felt like when they lost 9-8 last week to Ottawa, I didn't think a lot of it was on Walsh. Walsh seems to be getting stronger as a goalie as he goes along. And one of the things I
Yes.
notice with him is he'll let a goal in, but then the next 2-3 shots, he's right there. He's right there stopping
2
them.
home games. He's strongest in the fourth quarter. He keeps getting better throughout.
Right. I'm just
It
kind
was
of
3-2 in the Seals game for the Seals.
That's right.
And yet, when it got to the fourth quarter, he came through.
Yeah, and that was the difference. Like I said earlier, about had high expectations for Chris Origlieri in that game, just because, obviously all of the fanfare around Origlieri last year in the WLA, his play with the Shamrocks, like he was named one of the best players in the league last year in the WLA, right? And I mean, probably a lot of the
Yes, he
reason.
was the top goalie in the WLA. Yes.
That's right. And, that was one of the main reasons why Victoria made it to the Mann Cup. And it was fun to watch him. Origlieri was named goaltender of the year, 10 wins, 670 save percentage, 842 save percentage, and 4 assists. So that was definitely one of the reasons to watch San Diego a couple of weeks ago. And like we said, he seemed to struggle in the fourth quarter. So we'll see what happens tonight with Higgins. I mean, Higgins was great last week against the Warriors. I don't have the stats right here in front of me, but I thought in a lot of ways he won in the game. And the other challenge for the Warriors there, as I mentioned to you, is they seem to get back-to-back penalties. There's a couple instances there where they got 2 penalties in a row. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, I don't really understand why they're getting back-to-back penalties. Ottawa had a couple of 2-man advantages that they capitalized on. I'm trying to think what other little tidbits we could throw out for tonight. I got a couple other things to hear. Obviously, one of the things that was mentioned on the Donnie and Dolly podcast, which is really going to be important this week for the Warriors, is the fact that Jeff Cornwall was out. And Kurt sort of said it on the air. He said, depending on who was watching, is that Jeff's supposed to come back this week. And I talked to Brett Mitski about his chemistry and his past play working with Jeff, and sort of what he brings to that team. And I was just looking at something here. Cornwall played last season with the Roughnecks, so that explains some obvious familiarity with Kurt Malofsky. Obviously, teammates with Brett Mitski, Ryan Delkson, and Riley Lowen when they were playing with the Saskatchewan Rush. So, another pickup for Vancouver in the offseason that's really benefited the Warriors and their defense. And I got to grab one more thing that I found on the WLA's Twitter account. And that was in regards to Braden Lady and I'm trying to think who else here. Braden Lady and there it is. Braden Lady and Remy Shinato, obviously mentioned on the WLA Twitter account this week as territorial protections. Lady playing with the Maple Ridge Berards in the WLA, and Remy Shinato and playing with the Coquitlam Adanacs. Is there any last minute stuff or any last little tidbits you want to add in before we wrap it up?
Yes, I want to give a shout out to the Warriors and how they give to the community. There's several of them, like minor lacrosse camps, spring, summer, and winter. And they can sign up, but when it gets close to that time, Stick to School is a free 1-hour program. The Warriors players go into the schools in the Lower Mainland from grades kindergarten to 9 years old. Every Kid's Dream, in partnership with the British Columbia Lacrosse Association, they invite players between the ages of 6 and 13 into the starting lineup. You see it in the games. They're lining up with the Warriors. What a thrill that would be for a kid. The food bank visit, they help in the food bank and volunteer there. This is another one I just was aware of. Caught You Being a Warrior. They love to see the fans with their Warrior gear on, and staff members are given special cards to hand out to lucky fans in the community. The Student Ambassador Program, Warrior Student Ambassador. They invite highly passionate and energetic students to become Warrior ambassadors on their campus to sell tickets and represent the brand. And there's the pub program. There's so many programs. The Warriors are not just lacrosse players; they're community-minded people, and so is Kurt Malofsky. And it's a great organization. And you can go on https /VancouverWarriors.com/Warriors-giving back, and you'll be able to find that there. A whole bunch of really good programs. I'm excited about the game tonight, and we're looking for a win because after 2 wins and 2 losses in a row, they're due for a win.
It seems like they are
to blow the Black Bears out.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I think those losses were close, and it just feels like they're going to get revenge on Ottawa tonight. And I should mention also too, tonight got some promo from the Warriors too, that it's First Nations night. So just trying to see if there's anything else we can share. Obviously, a couple other tidbits here. Looking at both teams, Higgins is in. We talked about that. 810 save percentage, 9.6 goals against. That's going to be huge. Obviously, Jacob Dunbar, the one Surrey-born player, 22 points, 14 goals, 8 assists, across 6 games. We've already talked a little bit about the Black Bears, obviously, from last week. And obviously, Jeff Teed is playing for the Black Bears because they are the converted New York Riptide and who moved to Ottawa in the offseason. But let's wrap it up there. Check out some links here, facebook.com/Golden V podcast, goldenvpodcast.ca, and also on Buzzsprout, buzzsprout.com/186-9778. I'll talk to everyone soon.